The blood trail in the snow was already freezing over when Penelope Katherine saw the first rider emerge from the white curtain of the blizzard behind her. She had been running for 2 days straight, her horse long since collapsed from exhaustion somewhere back in the Montana wilderness. And now she stumbled through knee-deep drifts with nothing but the thin coat she had grabbed when fleeing her uncle's ranch. The wind howled like a demon, but not loud enough to drown out the distant shouts of the men who wanted her dead. Her uncle had been a cruel man. Everyone in Abilene, Texas knew that much, but few understood the depths of his depravity until Penelope had discovered the truth about her father's death 3 weeks prior. The old rancher had not died in a tragic accident as everyone believed. He had been murdered, shot in the back by his own brother who wanted the land and the small fortune hidden in the ranch safe. Penelope had found the letters, the proof, everything she needed to see her uncle hang. But she had been careless, and he had discovered her snooping. She had barely escaped with her life, stealing a horse in the dead of night and riding north into the winter wilderness, hoping to reach the law in the next territory before her uncle's hired guns caught up with her. That hope was dying now, frozen like her fingers and toes. She could see them more clearly through the swirling snow. 10 riders, spread out in a line, moving methodically through the storm. They knew she could not run much farther. They were patient, confident, taking their time like wolves circling wounded prey. Penelope's legs gave out beneath her, and she crashed face first into a snowdrift. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled uselessly. This was where it would end then. Alone in the Montana mountains, killed by men who cared nothing for justice or mercy, buried under snow until spring thaw revealed her bones. She closed her eyes and waited for the gunshots. Instead, she heard a voice, low and steady, cutting through the wind like a blade. "Miss, you need to get up right now." Penelope's eyes snapped open. A man stood over her, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy sheepskin coat dusted white with snow. His face was weathered and strong, with a dark beard and eyes the color of steel. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with the look of someone who had spent his entire life outdoors. A black hat sat low on his head and 2 revolvers hung at his hips. "I cannot," Penelope whispered. "Leave me. They will kill you too." "Nobody is killing anybody today except maybe me," the cowboy said. He reached down and pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness despite his rough appearance. "My name is Nathan Kendrick. I have a camp about 50 yards that way, hidden in the rocks. Can you make it that far?" "There are 10 of them," Penelope said, her teeth chattering so violently she could barely speak. 10 men, you have to run." Nathan looked past her at the approaching riders, his expression calm and measuring. Then he looked back down at her, and something like a smile touched his lips. "I will handle them all," he said simply. "Now move." He half carried, half dragged her through the snow toward a cluster of large boulders that Penelope had not even noticed in the blizzard. Between them was a small sheltered space where a fire still burned, protected from the wind. A magnificent paint horse stood tied nearby, its coat thick against the cold. Nathan deposited Penelope next to the fire and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Stay here and stay quiet," he said. "No matter what you hear, do not come out." "You cannot fight 10 men alone," Penelope protested. But Nathan was already walking back out into the storm, his hand resting casually on one of his revolvers. She watched through a gap in the rocks as he strode directly toward the line of approaching riders, utterly fearless. The 10 men saw him and reined in their horses, spreading out slightly, hands moving toward their weapons. Even through the snow, Penelope could see the confusion on their faces. Who was this stranger who dared to stand between them and their quarry? The lead rider, A scarred brute named Dalton, whom Penelope recognized from her uncle's ranch, spurred his horse forward a few paces. "Out of the way, Cowboy," Dalton shouted over the wind. "We have business here that does not concern you." "I am making it my business," Nathan called back. "The woman is under my protection now. Turn around and ride back wherever you came from." Dalton laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "There are 10 of us and one of you. Maybe you cannot count too good." "I can count just fine," Nathan said. 10 graves I will be digging come spring." Last chance to ride away. The riders looked at each other, some clearly uneasy at Nathan's absolute confidence, others sneering at what they saw as empty bravado. Dalton's face darkened with rage. "Kill him," he snarled. What happened next occurred so fast that Penelope could scarcely follow it. Nathan's hands moved in a blur, and suddenly both his revolvers were drawn and firing. The explosions cracked through the blizzard like thunder. Dalton went down first, knocked clean off his horse with a bullet through his shoulder. 2 more men fell before any of them even cleared their holsters. The remaining 7 scattered, wheeling their horses and returning fire, but Nathan was already moving, diving behind a snow-covered boulder as bullets whined past him. Penelope pressed her hands to her mouth to keep from screaming. She had witnessed violence before, but nothing like this. Nathan moved through the storm like a ghost, appearing and disappearing between rocks and snowdrifts, his gun speaking with deadly accuracy. Another rider fell, then another. The remaining men were shouting in panic now, their confident hunt turned into a nightmare ambush. They could not see where Nathan was, but he clearly knew exactly where they were. One of the riders made a break for it, spurring his horse back the way they had come. Nathan let him go. The 4 who remained tried to regroup, backing their horses together and firing wildly into the swirling white. Nathan rose from behind a drift 30 yards to their left and fired twice. 2 more men toppled from their saddles. The last pair threw down their weapons and raised their hands. "We are done," one of them shouted. "Do not shoot, we surrender." Nathan emerged from cover, his revolvers still trained on the 2 men. His voice carried clearly through the wind. "Who sent you?" "Victor Kendall," the man said quickly. "The girl's uncle. He is paying us to bring her back dead or alive." "Is that right?" Nathan said, his tone flat and cold. "Well, you go back and tell Victor Kendall that his niece is not coming back. You tell him if he sends more men, they will end up like your friends here. You tell him if he is smart, he will pack up and leave Texas before the law catches up with him. You understand me?" Both men nodded frantically. Nathan gestured with his gun. "Pick up your wounded and get out of my sight. Leave the weapons." The 2 men scrambled to obey, hauling the groaning Dalton onto a horse and gathering the 3 other men who were still alive, all wounded but not fatally. Within minutes they were riding back south, disappearing into the blizzard. 3 bodies lay still in the snow. Nathan walked to each one, checked for signs of life, then began the grim work of moving them away from his camp. Penelope watched all of this from her shelter by the fire, her mind reeling. She had never seen anyone move and shoot like that. Nathan had faced down 10 armed men and one without taking a single hit himself. He was either the luckiest man alive or the most dangerous. When he finally returned to the camp, snow clinging to his beard and coat, his expression was troubled rather than triumphant. "I am sorry you had to see that," he said quietly, holstering his revolvers. "I do not enjoy killing, but sometimes there is no other choice." "You saved my life," Penelope whispered. "I do not even know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Nathan said. He knelt by the fire and added more wood, then looked at her properly for the first time. His steel-gray eyes softened slightly. "You are half frozen and exhausted." "When did you last eat?" "I do not remember," Penelope admitted. Yesterday morning, perhaps. Nathan pulled supplies from his pack and began preparing food, working quickly and efficiently. Soon he had coffee brewing and salt pork sizzling in a pan. The smell made Penelope's stomach clench painfully. He handed her a tin cup of coffee first, and she wrapped her numb fingers around it gratefully, feeling the warmth seep back into her bones. "My name is Penelope Katherine," she said. "My father owned a ranch outside Abilene, Texas. When he died last year, his brother Victor took over everything. I discovered recently that Victor murdered my father for the property. I found proof, letters between him and some men he hired. I was going to take everything to the marshal, but Victor found out and sent his men after me. I have been running for weeks." Nathan listened carefully, his face grave. He handed her a plate of food and she ate ravenously while he considered her words. "Abilene is a long way from Montana," he said finally. "What brought you this far north?" "I was trying to reach my mother's sister in Helena," Penelope said. "I thought if I could get that far, I would be safe, that I could send word to the Texas Rangers and have them arrest Victor. But I ran out of supplies and my horse died and those men kept getting closer." She set down her empty plate, feeling tears prick her eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. "I truly believed I was going to die today." "You are safe now," Nathan said firmly. "I promise you that." "How can you promise such a thing?" Penelope asked, her voice breaking. "My uncle has money and men and he will not stop until I am dead. You cannot protect me forever." "Maybe not forever," Nathan agreed. "But I can protect you long enough to get you somewhere safe and make sure justice is served. I was a lawman myself once, down in New Mexico territory. I know how these things work." "Why did you stop being a lawman?" Penelope asked. Something dark crossed Nathan's face. "That is a long story for another time. Right now you need rest. The storm will blow itself out by morning and then we will ride for Helena. It is only about 30 miles north from here. Once we arrive, we can send telegrams to the authorities in Texas and start putting together a case against your uncle." "He will deny everything," Penelope said bitterly. "He will claim I am lying, that I stole from him and ran away." "Maybe," Nathan said. "But you said you have proof. Letters. Where are they now?" Penelope reached inside her coat and pulled out an oilskin pouch she had kept pressed against her body for warmth. Inside were several folded papers, slightly damp but still readable. Nathan took them carefully and examined them by the firelight, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is enough to hang him," Nathan said. "These letters explicitly discuss killing your father and dividing the ranch profits. If we can get these to the Rangers, Victor Kendall is finished." "If we can get them there," Penelope said. "He still has men, and now they know I am with someone who can fight. He will send more, better gunmen." "Let him try," Nathan said, but there was no bravado in his voice this time, only grim determination. He folded the letters carefully and handed them back. "You should sleep now. I will keep watch." "You need rest too," Penelope protested. "I will rest when you are safe," Nathan said. "Please, Miss Katherine, do not argue. You are exhausted." He was right. Now that she was warm and fed, the adrenaline that had kept Penelope moving for days was finally draining away. She felt as though she could sleep for a week. She lay down near the fire, wrapped in Nathan's extra blankets, and watched him settle against a boulder with his rifle across his knees, silhouetted against the dancing flames. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was thinking that she had never felt safer in her entire life. She woke to sunlight and silence. The blizzard had passed in the night, leaving behind a world transformed into white perfection. The sky was brilliantly blue, the air crystal clear and bitterly cold. Nathan was brewing fresh coffee, and his paint horse was already saddled and ready to ride. "Good morning," he said when he saw her stirring. "We should get moving soon. I want to reach Helena before dark." Penelope sat up, feeling stiff and sore but infinitely better than the previous day. Nathan handed her coffee and more food, and she ate while he packed up the camp with practiced efficiency. Within an hour they were ready to leave. "My horse can carry us both," Nathan said, helping Penelope mount. "It is a long ride, but he is strong." Penelope settled into the saddle and Nathan swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to grip the reins. She was acutely aware of his solid presence at her back, the warmth of him cutting through the cold. They rode out of the rocky shelter and headed north through the pristine snow. The journey was long and difficult, the paint horse struggling through deep drifts, but Nathan guided them expertly, finding the easiest paths and stopping periodically to rest the animal. As they rode, they talked, sharing stories to pass the time. Penelope learned that Nathan had grown up in Kansas, the son of a rancher who had lost everything in the financial panic of 1873. He had become a lawman to support his family, serving as a deputy marshal in New Mexico for 3 years before something had happened that made him quit. "I made a mistake," Nathan said quietly when Penelope pressed him on the subject. "I trusted the wrong person and good people died because of it. I could not wear the badge after that, so I drifted north, working odd jobs, trying to find some kind of peace." "That sounds terribly lonely," Penelope said. "It has been," Nathan admitted, "but maybe things are changing now." There was something in his voice that made Penelope's heart skip. She turned slightly in the saddle to look at him and found his gray eyes already on her, intense and searching. "You are a remarkable woman, Penelope Katherine," he said. "Most people would have given up days ago, but you kept fighting. You have strength in you." "I was just trying to survive," Penelope said, feeling her cheeks warm despite the cold. "That takes strength," Nathan said. "More than you know." They reached Helena just as the sun was setting, the town glowing with lamplight against the darkening mountains. Nathan took them straight to the marshal's office, where a grizzled old lawman named Marshal Briggs listened with increasing interest to Penelope's story. When she produced the letters, Briggs' expression turned thunderous. "I know Victor Kendall by reputation," the marshal said. "Nasty piece of work. These letters are damning evidence, Miss Katherine. I will telegraph the Rangers in Austin immediately and see about getting a warrant issued for his arrest." "What about Penelope's safety?" Nathan asked. "Kendall still has men out there." "She can stay in protective custody here in Helena until the matter is resolved," Briggs said. "We have secure accommodations." But Penelope shook her head. "No, I want to go back to Texas. I want to face my uncle and see him arrested personally. I owe that much to my father's memory." "That could be dangerous," Briggs warned. "I will go with her," Nathan said. "I will keep her safe." The marshal studied Nathan carefully. "You have the look of a fighting man. Were you in the war?" After, Nathan said. "I was a deputy marshal in New Mexico Territory." Briggs' eyebrows rose. "Nathan Kendrick, I heard about you. They said you were the fastest draw in the territory." "They exaggerated," Nathan said shortly. "Maybe," Briggs said. "But if half the stories are true, Miss Katherine could not ask for better protection." He turned to Penelope. "If you are determined to return to Texas, I will send a deputy with you as well. Between him and Kendrick, you should be well protected. But we will need to wait for confirmation from the Rangers before we move. That could take a few days." Those few days stretched into a week while telegrams flew back and forth between Montana and Texas. The Rangers confirmed they were opening an investigation into Victor Kendall based on the evidence Penelope provided. They requested that she return to Abilene to give a formal statement and testify before a judge. In the meantime, Penelope and Nathan stayed in Helena, taking rooms at a modest boarding house while they waited for travel arrangements to be finalized. It was during those quiet days that something shifted between them. They took walks together through the snow-covered streets, sharing meals and conversation. Nathan told her more about his life, his regrets and hopes, and Penelope found herself opening up in ways she never had with anyone before. There was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, not just physically but emotionally. He listened when she talked about her father, about the grief and anger she carried, and he did not try to offer empty platitudes or tell her to forget the past. He simply understood. One evening, as they stood on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson, Nathan turned to her with an expression of profound seriousness. "Penelope, I need to tell you something," he said. "When this is over, when your uncle is behind bars and you are safe again, I do not want to say goodbye to you." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that somewhere along the way I fell in love with you," Nathan said simply. "I know it has only been a week, and I know you have been through hell and probably are not thinking about such things, but I needed you to know. You have become the most important person in my life." Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Nathan, I feel the same way. I have never met anyone like you. You are good and brave and kind, and when I am with you, I feel like I can face anything." Nathan reached out and cupped her face gently in his rough hands. "Then, when this is finished, will you consider letting me court you properly? I do not have much to offer right now, just a horse and some savings, but I am a hard worker and I will do everything in my power to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Penelope whispered. "Yes, Nathan, yes to all of it." He kissed her then, soft and careful as though she were something precious. Penelope melted into him, her hands fisting in his coat, feeling safer and more cherished than she had since her father died. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The next morning, word came from the Texas Rangers. They had arrested Victor Kendall on suspicion of murder based on the evidence Penelope had provided. He was being held in the Abilene jail awaiting trial. The Rangers requested that Penelope return as soon as possible to give her testimony. Marshal Briggs arranged for Deputy Collins, a young but capable lawman, to escort them south on the train. The journey back to Texas took 5 days, traveling by train and stagecoach through winter-locked country. Nathan never left Penelope's side, always alert for danger, but the trip was mercifully uneventful. When they finally rolled into Abilene on a cold February morning, Penelope felt a complex mixture of emotions. This was home, but it was also the place where her father had been murdered and her uncle had tried to have her killed. Captain William Hayes of the Texas Rangers met them at the station, a tall man with a magnificent mustache and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He shook hands with Nathan and Deputy Collins, then bowed politely to Penelope. "Miss Katherine, thank you for making the journey back," Hayes said. "I want you to know that your uncle is in custody and will face justice for what he has done. The trial has been scheduled for next week, and your testimony will be crucial to securing a conviction." "What about his hired men?" Penelope asked. "The ones who chased me into Montana. We have arrested 5 of them," Hayes said. "They are all facing charges of attempted murder and conspiracy. Several more have fled the territory, but we will find them eventually." Hayes took them to a hotel where rooms had been arranged at Ranger expense. Over the next few days, Penelope met with prosecutors and gave detailed statements about everything that had happened. Nathan stayed close throughout the process, a silent but reassuring presence. The lawyers were impressed by Penelope's clear memory and the damning evidence contained in the letters she had recovered. The trial, when it finally came, was a sensation. The courtroom was packed with townspeople eager to see justice done. Victor Kendall sat at the defense table looking haggard and furious, his expensive lawyers flanking him like vultures. But no amount of legal maneuvering could overcome the weight of evidence against him. Penelope took the stand and told her story calmly and clearly, producing the letters that proved Victor's guilt beyond any doubt. Several of the hired guns offered reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation, testified that Victor had paid them to kill his brother and later to hunt down Penelope. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Victor Kendall was found guilty of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to hang. As the verdict was read, Victor's face twisted with rage and he lunged toward Penelope, screaming obscenities and threats. Nathan was out of his seat in an instant, placing himself between Penelope and her uncle, one hand on his revolver. Deputies wrestled Victor back into custody and dragged him from the courtroom still shouting. "It is over," Nathan said quietly, taking Penelope's hand. "It is finally over." Penelope collapsed against him, overwhelmed with relief and grief and exhaustion. She wept then for the first time since her father's death, great shuddering sobs that shook her entire body. Nathan held her through it all, stroking her hair and murmuring gentle reassurances until the storm of emotion passed. In the days that followed, Penelope had to face the complicated task of reclaiming her father's ranch. Victor had run the property into the ground during his brief tenure, firing good workers and squandering money on gambling and drink. The ranch was deeply in debt and in poor condition. Captain Hayes helped Penelope navigate the legal process of taking back control, and Nathan threw himself into the physical work of restoring the property. "You do not have to do this," Penelope told him one evening as they surveyed the ramshackle buildings and overgrown fields. "This is not your responsibility." "I want to," Nathan said. "Penelope, I meant what I said in Helena. I love you and I want to build a life with you if you will have me. This ranch can be part of that life." "It is a lot of work," Penelope warned. "It will take years to make it profitable again." "Then we will work for years," Nathan said simply. "I am not afraid of hard work and I am not going anywhere." Penelope threw her arms around him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I love you too, Nathan Kendrick, more than I can possibly say." They were married in April, in a simple ceremony at the Abilene Church with Captain Hayes and Marshal Briggs serving as witnesses. Penelope wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and Nathan wore his best suit with his guns conspicuously absent for the first time since Penelope had known him. She had never seen him look so handsome or so happy. The years that followed were hard but good. Nathan proved to be not just a skilled fighter but also an excellent rancher, with a natural affinity for horses and cattle. Together, he and Penelope rebuilt the ranch from the ground up, hiring good workers and slowly paying off the debts Victor had accumulated. It took 3 years of backbreaking work, but eventually the ranch began to turn a profit again. They renamed it the Double K Ranch for their shared surname, and it became known throughout the region for producing quality horses. In the spring of 1880, Penelope gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after her father. Nathan was present for the birth, holding Penelope's hand through the long labor and weeping unashamedly when the baby finally arrived healthy and squalling. 2 years later, their daughter Margaret was born, followed by another son, James, in 1884. Through it all, Nathan remained the same steady, loving presence he had been since that snowy day in Montana, when he had appeared like an avenging angel to save Penelope's life. He was a devoted husband and father, patient with the children and endlessly supportive of Penelope's ideas for expanding the ranch. They made all major decisions together, true partners in every sense of the word. The nightmares came sometimes for both of them. Penelope would wake gasping from dreams of running through snow with gunfire echoing behind her, and Nathan would hold her until the fear passed. Other nights it was Nathan who woke shouting, trapped in memories of his years as a lawman, the mistakes he had made and the people he could not save. On those nights, Penelope would be the one offering comfort, reminding him that he was a good man who had saved far more lives than he had failed to protect. "You saved my life," she would whisper in the darkness. "You gave me a future when I had none. Never forget that." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Penelope with a gift. He led her out to the main pasture where a beautiful chestnut mare stood waiting, already saddled. "She is yours," Nathan said, grinning at Penelope's delighted expression. "I have been training her for months. She is gentle but fast, and she will not give up on you no matter what." "Just like her trainer," Penelope said, kissing her husband soundly. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me." "Thank you for letting me," Nathan said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope Kendrick. I would face down 100 armed men again if it meant finding my way back to you." They rode together that afternoon, racing across the green Texas grassland with the wind in their hair and the sun warm on their faces, their children's laughter echoing from the ranch house behind them. The past, with all its pain and violence, seemed very far away. Ahead lay only promise, a future built on love and hard work and absolute trust in each other. Victor Kendall had been hanged 5 years earlier, his last word a curse against Penelope and Nathan both. But his hatred had died with him, powerless in the face of what they had built together. The ranch prospered. The children grew strong and healthy, and every night Nathan and Penelope fell asleep in each other's arms, grateful beyond words for the chance encounter in a Montana blizzard that had changed both their lives forever. Years continued to pass in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Thomas grew into a tall, serious boy with his father's steady nature and his mother's sharp intelligence. He loved working with the horses and announced at age 12 that he wanted to be a rancher just like his parents. Margaret was quick and clever, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. James was the wild one, constantly getting into mischief and keeping both parents on their toes. In 1890, when Penelope was 38 and Nathan 41, they received unexpected news. Captain Hayes, long retired from the Rangers, wrote to inform them that several of Victor Kendall's surviving hired guns had finally been captured in Arizona territory. The men were facing charges for various crimes, but the Arizona authorities wanted to know if Nathan and Penelope wished to press additional charges related to the Montana incident. Nathan and Penelope discussed it at length. Part of Penelope wanted to see every man who had hunted her face justice. But another part, the part that had healed and grown strong over the years, simply wanted to let it go. "Those men have already lost," Penelope said finally. "They are in prison, their lives are ruined, and we are here with everything we could possibly want. What more vengeance do we need?" "None," Nathan agreed, pulling her close. "We have already won." They wrote back to Captain Hayes declining to press additional charges, choosing instead to focus on the life they had built. It felt good to close that final chapter, to definitively put the past behind them. The Double K Ranch continued to grow and thrive. By 1895, they employed 15 full-time workers and were shipping horses as far as California and Missouri. Thomas, now 20, was managing much of the day-to-day operations, proving himself to be a skilled and fair boss. Margaret had married a kind young schoolteacher and moved to Dallas, where she was expecting her first child. James, at 16, was still figuring out what he wanted to do with his life, though he showed promise as a blacksmith. On a warm evening in June of that year, Nathan and Penelope sat together on the porch of the ranch house they had rebuilt with their own hands. They were older now, gray threading through their hair and lines marking their faces, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "Do you ever think about that day in Montana?" Penelope asked, her head resting on Nathan's shoulder. "About how close I came to dying before we ever met, sometimes," Nathan admitted. "And every time I do, I thank God I was in the right place at the right time. I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "I cannot imagine mine without you either," Penelope said. "You know what is funny? I used to think my life ended the day my father was murdered, but really, it was just beginning. Everything good I have now, everything beautiful and worthwhile, came from the worst moment of my life." "Maybe that is how it works sometimes," Nathan said thoughtfully. "Maybe we have to go through darkness to truly appreciate the light." "Maybe," Penelope agreed. She turned to look at her husband, this man who had appeared out of a blizzard and changed her entire world. His face was as dear to her now as it had been that first morning when she woke to find him watching over her, protecting her from harm. "I love you, Nathan Kendrick. I loved you from the moment you said you would handle them all, even though I thought you were crazy." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I was a little crazy. 10 armed men and I just walked right at them, but I could not let them have you. Something in me knew even then that you were going to be important to me." "Fate," Penelope said. "Fate," Nathan agreed. "Or luck or providence or whatever you want to call it. All I know is I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would face down 1,000 men if it meant keeping you safe." "I know you would," Penelope said softly. "That is who you are. My protector, my partner, my love." They sat together as the sun set over the Texas plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep purple. In the distance, they could hear the cattle lowing and the horses nickering in the barns. Thomas was walking back from the south pasture, his day's work complete. Inside the house, the cook was preparing dinner, and soon the family would gather around the table as they did every evening. It was a simple life, perhaps, but it was theirs. Built from nothing, forged in hardship and sealed with love that had never wavered. The ranch that had nearly been lost to greed and murder was now thriving again, home to 3 generations of Kendricks and likely to remain so for generations to come. Nathan pulled Penelope closer, kissing the top of her head. She sighed contentedly, her hand finding his and their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. "No regrets?" Nathan asked quietly. "Not a single one," Penelope said. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner," Nathan said. "But I suppose we found each other exactly when we were meant to." "Yes," Penelope agreed. "Exactly when we were meant to." The stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, brilliant and countless. Somewhere far to the north, snow was probably falling in the Montana mountains where their story had begun. But here in Texas, the night was warm and gentle, full of promise and peace. Nathan and Penelope rose and went inside together, ready for dinner and family, and all the ordinary miracles that made up their extraordinary life. Behind them, the porch swing creaked softly in the evening breeze, a gentle sound of home. The years rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow as all lives do. In 1897, they received word that Marshall Briggs had passed away in Helena, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. Nathan and Penelope made the long journey north for the funeral, bringing Thomas with them. It was Penelope's first time back in Montana since that terrible winter of 1878, and she was surprised by how different it looked in summer, all green meadows and clear skies. "It is hard to believe this is the same place where I almost died," she said, standing in the Helena cemetery after the service. "It is not," Nathan said. "Nothing stays the same. We change, places change, life moves forward." They visited the area where Nathan had made his camp that fateful day, though it took some searching to find the right spot. The boulders were still there, worn smooth by nearly 20 years of weather. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadow where 10 men had once hunted Penelope through the snow. "This is where you saved me," Penelope said, touching one of the rocks. "Where you changed everything." "Where we saved each other," Nathan corrected gently. "I was lost before I met you, Penelope, drifting through life without purpose or hope. You gave me something to fight for, something to believe in again." Thomas, who had heard the story of his parents meeting many times but never visited the actual location, looked around with wonder. "It must have taken a lot of courage to face down 10 armed men," he said to his father. "It took love," Nathan said. "I did not even know her yet, but something in me recognized that she was worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary." "But you did not die," Thomas pointed out. "You won." "We won," Nathan said, pulling Penelope close. "Together." They returned to Texas with a sense of completion, as though visiting Montana had closed a circle that had been open for 2 decades. The nightmares that occasionally troubled both Nathan and Penelope faded after that trip, as though laying eyes on the place one more time had finally exercised its power over them. In 1900, as the new century dawned, the Kendrick family gathered for a photograph in front of the ranch house. Nathan and Penelope stood in the center, their children and grandchildren arranged around them. Thomas and his wife held their 3 children. Margaret and her husband had brought their 2 daughters from Dallas. James, now 21 and newly engaged to a rancher's daughter from the neighboring spread, stood tall and proud. The photographer, a serious man from Abilene, arranged them carefully and ducked under his black cloth. "Everyone hold still," he called, "and try to smile. This is a happy occasion." Nathan and Penelope smiled at each other rather than at the camera, their love evident in every line of their faces. When the photograph was developed weeks later, that moment was captured forever. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had built an empire of love and family from the ashes of tragedy. The ranch continued to prosper into the new century. They added more land, more buildings, more workers. Thomas proved to be even better at ranching than his parents, with a gift for breeding horses that produced some of the finest animals in Texas. The Double K brand became synonymous with quality and fair dealing. Nathan retired from active ranch work at age 60, his body finally demanding rest after decades of hard labor. But retirement suited him poorly. He still rose at dawn every day, still walked the property checking on animals and talking to workers. Penelope, at 57, remained active in managing the ranch books and business correspondence. They made a formidable team, respected throughout the region. In the spring of 1909, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from 3 counties. The ranch house overflowed with well-wishers, friends, and family. Nathan gave a short speech, his voice still strong despite his 60 years. 30 years ago, I made a promise to this woman," he said, holding Penelope's hand. "I promised to love her, protect her, and stand by her side no matter what came. It has been the easiest promise I ever kept, because loving Penelope has been the joy and purpose of my life. Here is to 30 more years together." Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. Penelope, tears shining in her eyes, stood and kissed her husband to applause and catcalls from the younger crowd. "I have a speech too," she said when the noise died down. "It is very short." Nathan Kendrick, you are the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you found me in that blizzard. Everything good in my life flows from that moment. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. There was not a dry eye in the house. The party continued late into the night, filled with music and dancing and laughter. Years continued their steady march. Nathan and Penelope grew old together, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts still sharp. They became great-grandparents multiple times over, the ranch now home to 4 generations of Kendricks. On warm evenings, they would sit together on the porch as they had done for decades, watching the sun set and counting their blessings. In the summer of 1915, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia. At 66, his body struggled to fight off the infection. Penelope never left his bedside, holding his hand and talking to him even when he slipped into fevered unconsciousness. Thomas brought in the best doctor from Dallas, but the man could only do so much. For 3 days, Nathan hovered between life and death. On the 4th day, his fever broke. He opened his eyes to find Penelope asleep in a chair beside the bed, her hand still clutching his. He squeezed her fingers gently and she woke with a start. "Nathan," she breathed, "you are awake." "I am not going anywhere," he said, his voice raspy but determined. "I promised you 30 more years and I intend to deliver." Penelope laughed and cried at the same time, covering his face with kisses. "You stubborn man, do not ever scare me like that again." "I will try not to," Nathan said. "But Penelope, listen to me. If something does happen to me, I want you to know that my life has been everything I could have hoped for and more. You made me whole. You gave me purpose and love and a family. I have no regrets." "Stop talking like that," Penelope said fiercely. "You are going to be fine. We have many more years ahead of us." And they did. Nathan made a full recovery, and though he never regained quite the same vigor, he remained active and engaged well into his 70s. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1919, then their 50th in 1929, an extraordinary achievement in an era when life expectancy was much shorter. In the winter of 1932, at the age of 83, Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. He simply did not wake one morning, his heart, having finally decided it, had beaten enough. The entire region mourned the loss of a man who had been a pillar of the community for over half a century. Penelope, now 80, stood at his graveside and delivered the eulogy herself, her voice steady despite her grief. "Nathan Kendrick was the finest man I ever knew," she said. "He saved my life when I was barely more than a girl, hunted through the snow by evil men. He faced down impossible odds to protect me, and then he spent the next 53 years proving that courage was not just for crisis moments but for every single day. He was a devoted husband, a loving father and grandfather, a fair employer, and a true friend. The hole he leaves in this world is immeasurable, but the legacy he built will endure for generations." She lived for 6 more years, remaining sharp and engaged despite her advancing age. She saw the ranch through the difficult years of the Great Depression, working with Thomas to keep their workers employed even when money was tight. She played with great-great-grandchildren and told them stories about the Wild West that seemed like ancient history to children growing up in the era of automobiles and airplanes. On a spring morning in 1938, Penelope Katherine Kendrick passed away peacefully at the age of 86. She was buried beside Nathan on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone, simple and elegant, read, "Together in life, together in eternity, true partners, true love." The Double K Ranch remained in the Kendrick family for generations after, each successive owner adding their own chapters to the family story, but never forgetting the foundation Nathan and Penelope had laid. The tale of how they met, how a cowboy had faced down 10 armed men in a Montana blizzard to save a desperate woman, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. In the ranch house office, preserved in a place of honor, was the photograph from 1900 showing Nathan and Penelope surrounded by their growing family. Visitors to the ranch always commented on the love evident in their faces, the way they looked at each other rather than at the camera. It was a reminder that true love, forged in hardship and strengthened by time, could overcome any obstacle. Their story became more than just family history. It became a testament to courage, to the power of love, and to the simple truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead directly to the best. Penelope had been hunted, desperate, certain she would die alone in the snow. Nathan had been drifting, lost, looking for meaning. Together, they had found everything they needed. The blizzard that had once threatened to kill Penelope became instead the storm that brought them together, that tested them and ultimately proved what they were capable of when they stood united. It was a beginning disguised as an ending, a moment of salvation wrapped in terror, the first chapter of a love story that would span more than half a century and touch countless lives. And every winter, when snow fell on the Texas plains, the Kendrick family would remember. They would remember that courage sometimes looks like one man standing between danger and someone worth protecting. They would remember that love can bloom even in the coldest circumstances. And they would remember Nathan and Penelope, whose extraordinary partnership had begun with 5 simple words: "I will handle them all." Those words had not been empty bravado. They had been a promise, and Nathan Kendrick had kept that promise every single day for the rest of his life. In doing so, he had not only saved Penelope's life but had given her something infinitely more precious: a reason to live, a partner to share the journey, and a love that truly did last until death and beyond. It was everything a great love story should be, and it was all completely, perfectly true.